Hello, my name is Bradley and I'm your host of The Internal Game. Okay, so you guys got a thumb? Got a thumb? Yeah, you got one. You got one, right? And you can use it whenever you want. You can text and use it to hold a pencil if you want to. Hold your hold your spoon and fork, whenever you need it. Right? You have a thumb, but you are not your thumb. Correct? You are not your thumb. You have one. Okay, your legs. Right? Do you have legs? You have an arm. You have head. Right? You got toes. Right? You have these things, right? But you are not these things, right? Okay, same thing with the mind. You have a mind. You have thoughts even. But you are not a mind and you are not thoughts even. Okay? So this whole thing, like, I'm pretty convinced that it's not a part of becoming. It's not a part of becoming something great, right? You are great. You are God, right? You are this thing. But what you became, right? When you identified was with mind. So you are God who identified with a mind-made self. God who believes he's mind and then pretends to be a human being. But you're lodged up here and believe your thoughts and these certain thoughts that you have about self that are true in the world, and then all of a sudden it's not all of a sudden, but you spend a lifetime with viewing the world from this mind-made self, and it got reflected, and it seems really true, right? That these things are the way that they are, and that you are this way. But no, it's about unbecoming this identity so you can be what you are, right? Because until then you are identified. Like I say this quite often, but like think about just the word itself. Identified. Something you have identified with. It needed you, God, to identify with it for then it to be your identity, for you to be something you became. This isn't about changing an identity into believing it's God. It's letting go of identity back to the realization that you are God. Now, the mind, when identified with, loves an identity. It loves to add things to the identity. It loves to, okay, now it finds out that it's God, right? You hear channels like this and say, oh, you're God. And it's like, but the mind doesn't know what that means. The mind's just like, okay, cool, I'm God. Hell yeah. Hell yeah, I'm God. And you would think, though, that the second that we found that out, that, like, there would be no more issues, right? You'd be like, okay, perfect. Hell yeah, right? And I remember when I first found out about law of assumption. It was like on a Wednesday night or something, Wednesday or Friday night. And then by Sunday, everything that I had affirmed for was there, boom, including the person that I had lost back in the day. And I was like, oh my gosh, dude, I'm God. All I gotta do is affirm for shit. Dude, I'm there. I'm gonna be a billionaire in 2 months. I remember thinking stuff like that. And in a couple of weeks, me and this person were back to a not so favorable place. I still had a lot of resentment, so I was looking at things a certain way and myself a certain way, and then it was back to the same way it was before I found out about law of assumption. So much for this newfound God realization, right? You would think that but I thought that was it. I thought that was it. I was like, man, I got it now. I affirm. I just tell it, and there it is. No, see, like, the telling it isn't the issue. It's that we keep going back to identity, right? No one has a problem with telling a new story. No one has a problem with affirming. It's going back. And what's happening is you're trying to change an identity to a favorable one, but you're trying to change it from this identity that actually doesn't want to change because it's just a version of a mind-made self. It's just a version of self, a mind-made self, nonetheless. And it exists all on its own. It's not going to be healed. It's not going to be transformed. It's not going to be affirmed into something new. It's an identity all on its own. This one has to be given up, and then if you want another identity, you choose that. But this one's not going to be changing anything. So, in my ideal world, is to not go for identity at all, because it's very limiting, like extremely limiting. Any type of mind-made self is extremely limiting. Like, I hope my wife doesn't text me after this and but like, I'm gonna tell a story about her. She's a mom, a great mom, wonderful mother. But like, and one kid, this is part of her identity. She's been, until she met me, was a single mom for a really, really long time, right? And it's not a bad identity at all, right? But she was alone and taking care of these kids for a long time, and you know, now her son, and my stepson, is 18. And because she has a mom as part of her identity, as something, as a way how she sees herself, an identity, part of it, right? Part of it. It's getting hard for her to accept that my stepson is 18 now, and that he is staying out a little bit later, right? And it's hard because our mind is like, what if he's not safe, and what if something happens, and like, again, she's just being mama bear. There's nothing wrong with this, but this idea of them not being little babies anymore is threatening this part of her identity. So she's trying to find something to protect, for this to still be mama bear, right? Okay, so this is why the people have like the empty net, or women have the empty nest syndrome, where they don't know what to do with themselves after when their kids leave, right? Again, not a bad identity at all, but an identity nonetheless. Same thing with these unfavorable identities, the ones that are pretty much rooted in victimhood and trauma and pain and being the abandoned one and things like that, right? Just, it's not bad or good, but like, what it says it wants and what it actually wants is different things, because it'll say that it wants to be loved and to be accepted and to be chosen and picked and living in a wonderful relationship. But like, you've had it before. This identity has had it before, and then it sabotaged it because it doesn't view itself this way. So like, it's going to view and create issues the same way that like any identity does. So the idea is to unbecome this mind-made self. These are like a certain amount of thoughts about self, basically, that you believe to be true about self, that are not you. Just like your thumb's not you. Just like your leg isn't you. None of these things are you, right? So like, if we want to get an idea about what this God thing is that some people say that we are, you have to unbecome the mind-made self, because, and then naturally you're left with what you are. It's not about becoming another identity. It's about being what you are. And you have forgotten, right? Because how would you remember if you're identified with a mind-made self? So, give me 1 second here. Sorry. Anyway, it's an unbecoming process, not a becoming. You don't need to become God. You are God. But you need to unbecome this little bitty identity, bruvs. Okay? This little bitty one that looks at things like shit, that looks at itself like shit. And then of course it sees everything like shit, and everything shows up as shit. Again, not who you are. But like, trying to change the identity in identity is impossible, because it doesn't want change. Trying to heal this identity is impossible, because there's nothing to heal. It's just its own version. You have to select a different way of being, but be careful about finding another identity. I talk about the YouTube thing. It's like, I love making YouTube videos, but I don't consider myself a YouTuber, because if I'm a YouTuber, right, like, and it's who I am, it's part of my identity. What happens if they take YouTube down? Right? No, that's me. It's part of me. YouTube's part of me. Right? Like, it would be something like that, and it'd be devastating. Same thing with anything. All that's happening is that like, you're viewing this person or whatever it is through this identity. That's it. And it's tricking you into thinking that it wants something more than it's getting, because it doesn't. Like, it actually wants to not be chosen. That's why when you're looking at text messages from this person, or thinking back about something, what you're looking for is the reasons why they're not going to choose you. What you're looking for is the reasons why they're going to stay gone. What you're actually looking for is the reasons why they're not coming back. Like, all this stuff. You're not like, yeah, the idea is simple as create new meaning, right? Create new meaning, yeah, and things change for sure. But the identity doesn't really want to create new meaning. And it finds it extremely hard to do, right? So we're not we're not playing in this identity. That's the whole thing, because it has a reality of its own that you've been experiencing. You want to disidentify from the identity altogether. You don't want to force something. You don't want to get a thought and say, oh, no, it's the opposite. Nope, nope. Actually, I'm safe and chosen to love. Nope, nope. You're not forcing it. Because now you're reinforcing the identity by being scared of it, as if it matters, right? Getting a thought, oh, no, it's going to manifest. No, like, no. It doesn't matter. These are just thoughts. So you start to disidentify with the identity altogether, unbecome this mind-made self that is not who you are. Think about what could be more insane than God fucking identifying as a couple thoughts, and then and them not even being favorable, by the way, but nonetheless, like, identifying with thoughts, believing that this magical God universe is now who he is, or who it is. So use it now, that it is this little identity. And then now the God is stuck. Finding out that it's God and be like, okay, but everything should be fine now then. No. It's identity. Something God identified with. Now, you came to have this awesome human experience, but you're not being a human when you're identified with mind. You're being a human mind pretending to be a human being. Really, really recognize this. If you don't think that you're addicted to thinking, or that you're not identified with mind, then stop thinking then. Stop it. Stop. You are more, far greater more than a mind. Right? I do get it. Society's kind of set up this way, like where we grow up and we have all these thoughts, and all of our consciousness is lodged in the mind, and the belief in separateness, and I get it. But you have to start this process of disidentifying with this mind-made self, mind in general. Because again, you have a mind, but you're not one. You want to be able to use your mind when you want to, and then set it down. You want to be able to, think if you want to, create if you want to, intend great things, tell cool stories, and not have to fight an identity. Not being like, oh man, like I keep thinking this way. Like, no, you want to start the process of, okay, these are just thoughts. Because again, I'll talk about this until I find a better way of explaining something, and as of late, I just have not. Until I find a better way of doing things. Trust me, when I find out, I'll tell you. But like, I just don't think there is right now. It's mine that's the problem. And so the more that you in the identity, these beliefs about self. So every time that you don't buy into these thoughts that are coming from these beliefs, you weaken this identity. This is good news. Now you're unbecoming, getting back to what you are. It's not about becoming something else. How could you become more than God? You can't. The idea is to unbecome this identity and then start choosing experiences. Living life fully, like enjoying things, and not being so attached to them because you're trying to find self in them. There's Eckhart that said, someone said, how do you drop attachments? And he was like, you can't, don't even try. But they'll naturally drop away when you no longer seek to find yourself in them, right? When you are no longer being this identity, guess what? The obsession to manifest somebody naturally drops away. Guess what? When you're no longer being in this identity, the shit meaning that you're assigning to everything naturally drops away. Something that you tried to do. It's just that, like, you're very limited from this identity by how you perceive things. That's it. That's all that's happening. That's it. And I'm not saying it's not challenging to be completely identified with mind your entire life, and especially a certain way of a certain amount of thoughts from the mind, and then stopping that. I'm not saying it's not challenging, but I'm saying it's not only doable, but it's half doable if you want to actually want to have a different experience. But remember, this particular identity that's so unfavorable doesn't really want to have a different experience, because then it can't reaffirm itself and stay alive. Because the second that you start to be a different way, then this identity no longer exists, and it's going to try to maybe fight for a little while to get you to identify with it. That's all that's happening every time that those thoughts are coming. Okay? So God doesn't need things. God doesn't really want things. He can choose to have an experience, or it can choose to have an experience. If you're a girl, then this goddess can choose to have an experience, right? I just mean that, like, it's this identity that scratches and claws and feels not enough and is actually looking for more unfavorable meaning and doesn't want to be picked than it is. That's all that's happening, right? But God doesn't do these things. So when you unbecome this identity and you no longer play in that and those thoughts that are coming from this identity and these beliefs about self, then like you're naturally, these things that you're doing and that are out there are naturally going to drop away. And there's a whole different perspective. There's a whole different reality, right? Because you're being completely different. You're no longer trapped. And then you can start choosing experience instead of like trying to find yourself in a person, trying to find yourself in a job, trying to find yourself in money, trying to find yourself in these things. Again, more identity than attachments there. And when and you guys have heard me talk, once attachment sets in, fear kicks in, and now how you actually see yourself in this identity is going to start perceiving these things from the fear of loss, creating a bunch of unfavorable meaning to reaffirm how it sees itself. And then you create a bunch of shit, and then we're like, no, I gotta change this, but the identity does not want to be changed. So this is about not trying to find a new home. This is about letting go of illusion, realizing that you are God playing human mind, and this is not cool, right? It's not bad, but it's not what you're here to do. Okay, so the part of the game is finding out that you are God, but you really only find that out when you start disidentifying with this mind-made self, because it has no idea what God even is. So, kind of like the Tao, the Tao Te Ching, where he says the eternal Tao, talking about God. He said the eternal Tao, if it can be told, then it's not the eternal Tao. Mind tries to explain things. God can't be explained. Right? Like Eckhart says, I can't tell you anything that you don't already know. It's just deep down you've forgotten, but I can point you in direction. When you start disidentifying with mind, you'll start coming to a bunch of realizations all on your own, because you're no longer limited. And then you're getting closer to truth about who you are than any type of video will ever explain to you. Okay? So start disidentifying with this mind-made self. You are not your mind. Not even close. And the whole gist here is that, like, once you get out of that, you'll actually be able to see remember the truth and get back to what you are. But like until then, it's kind of weird that we are God identified with thought, basically. And you can have thoughts, but you are not them. And you have thumbs, but you are not them. Okay? Anyway. And don't be scared, by the way, don't be scared of losing your person if you don't worry about them. Like, don't be scared of losing something if you don't worry. You can't lose something. I want to remind you of this. You can't lose something because you are connected to everything, but you are in charge of the experience. And if you are in a state of being, an identity that actually doesn't want to be chosen, is actually looking at the things as unfavorable and creating a bunch of shit meaning that reaffirms this identity of not being chosen, not being picked, not being enough, then has it been working for you? Like, can you at least see that part of the illusion? Like the illusion within that illusion? Like, do you not see that it's not working? And to just try something else, anything. And you can start with just not believing these thoughts coming from this identity. Start to disidentify. Get back to who you are, and I love you, and I will see you guys soon.